In March of 2023, people were quick to assume that Hendrick Motorsports received the greatest penalty in NASCAR's history, with all four of their race teams being issued a $100,000 fine and a 100-point penalty. Although the penalty has since been rescinded, this penalty would have been the largest to a NASCAR organization, but not to a single team. This record belongs to a man named Carl Long. Today, we all know Carl Long as owner of the NASCAR Xfinity and Cup team, MBM Motorsports. MBM has been very quiet so far in 2023, but did make headlines in 2022 with a double top 10 in the Xfinity Daytona Summer race with Timmy Hill and JJ Yeley. Although Carl has been lucky enough to make a career in NASCAR, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows for him. In fact, no one in NASCAR history had a bigger hurdle to get over than Carl Long did in 2009. But first, we have to set the scene a little bit. When Carl was just starting out in NASCAR in 1999, he was jumping in any machinery that he could. His first chance in the Cup Series came courtesy of a partnership with Thee Dixon. Between 1999 and 2002, Long made 6 Cup starts for Dixon with a remarkable 31 DNQs. After not making a single start in 2003, Long's best chance in NASCAR was in 2004. See, Long usually wouldn't make his first start in a season until halfway or later in the season. By the time he'd usually make his first start, he'd have half a dozen to a dozen DNQs. However, in 2004, he made the big show in the second race of the season at Rockingham. During this race, Long's most iconic moment in NASCAR happened. This completely derailed Long's season, but actually helped him publicly. Many NASCAR fans became Carl Long fans because they respected the work he put in and how it wasn't even his fault that his only race car was destroyed. It also kind of helped him get a ride for the next race at Las Vegas, racing for Hermie Sadler.
Fans, hundreds of them, have sent checks as small as $2, the biggest to $100 to help him get going again. So Carl is here, he's got a ride. How pleased are you to be here?
This trend did not continue as he was only able to make 4 more races for the rest of the season. After Long's successful season in 2005, where he made a career-high 9 races, his racing career tailed off. In 2008, Long made his first attempt at fielding a Cup car under his own name at Loudon, but DNQ'd. Alright, now we get to 2009. Carl Long failed to qualify for the Daytona 500 and didn't make any more attempts to race until the All-Star race. This wasn't to say that he was away from the sport by any means. He worked as a spotter and mechanic for Tony Raines. In Friday's practice session for the Open, Long had an engine to blow up during a mock qualifying run, and he had to scramble to replace an engine in time for qualifying. Luckily, qualifying was cancelled due to rain, and Long was actually awarded outside pole because of the cancellation. He was able to get an engine, but had to start in the back because of the engine change. The race went even worse for Carl, as on lap 2, the new engine expired as well. Despite having 2 engine failures in his second attempt of the season, it got even worse as the Wednesday after the All-Star race, Carl Long and his team was hammered by NASCAR for having an engine that was oversized. It was 0.17 cubic inches too large, measuring in at 358.17 cubic inches. Per NASCAR procedure and the 1 engine per weekend rule, NASCAR confiscated the blown motor. During the investigation, NASCAR found out it was too large. Long was originally hit with the loss of 200 drivers and owners points, and his crew chief, Charles Swing, was fined $200,000. Long, his wife, and Charles would be suspended for the next 12 race weekends. However, crew chief Swing was unable to pay the fine, so that responsibility was transferred to the team. When the team shut down soon after, the fine became Carl Long's own responsibility to pay himself. In the end, the loss of points really sucked, but they didn't have any in the first place. They literally had 0 points before this penalty. The big problem was of course the $200,000 fine. This was the true death penalty in racing, especially for a team the size of Long's. What makes this penalty even worse was that Long's team didn't even build the engine. It had been supplied by a third party, and they had just assumed it was within regulation. Carl bought the engine from longtime builder Ernie Elliott and said all the paperwork showed it was within NASCAR specifications. Long could have loaded up his car and gone home instead of turning the engine over to inspectors and trying to qualify for the non-points race with a backup motor. Now, Long didn't deny the engine was oversized, but offered a couple other explanations. He said that the engine could have expanded due to overheating, or simply it could have just been the normal wear and tear of the engine. Further, he argued that it was Ernie Elliott's fault because he said it met NASCAR specifications, and it obviously didn't. Carl wasn't out of a job completely. Bob Jenkins allowed him to work at Front Row Shop in the meantime. The entire ordeal was super shocking to many fans and members within the industry. Clearly, it was just an honest mistake, and clearly the engine didn't give the team much of an advantage since it blew up. But NASCAR was adamant that racing with an oversized engine was one of the biggest rules you could break. Many people expected some leniency simply based on how small the team was. Also, it was an exhibition race, it wasn't even points paying. Clearly, Long, his wife, or anyone associated with the team could not afford to pay the fine. So because of this, NASCAR wouldn't let up on the fine or the points, but they did offer Long to pay the fine as he entered races in the future, paying an extra $12,000 to $15,000 on top of the entry fees. So this sounds good and all, but Long's team operated on a very small budget. If the team even made a race, they would just finish last place anyways. With the proposed extra entry fees, the only race that made financial sense to even attempt was the Daytona 500. Anyways, NASCAR remained adamant that Long wouldn't compete in the Cup Series until he started to pay the fine off, or it was paid off entirely. This was just not possible under any circumstance for Carl. But one of the bright spots of the story was that in the coming weeks, fans donated over $16,000 to Long's website to attempt to help him pay for the fine. In response to the donations, Carl said, "That's a long ways off from $200,000. If I can keep stuff like this going, then maybe $200,000 is in sight. The next thing to do is stand outside the racetrack with my helmet and beg for change. I'm not above doing it either." Carl didn't race in another race until late 2010 in the Nationwide Series, making 3 starts at Michigan, Richmond, and Gateway. So this is where Carl's story starts to take a turn. In a weird way, the engine penalty may have worked out for Carl, at least on the driving side. This forced him to drop back to the Nationwide Series instead of him focusing all of his efforts on one-offs in the Cup Series. In 2011, Carl started 25 of 34 races in the Nationwide Series, the first time he was behind the wheel of a car for double-digit races in a season. He made the majority of his starts for Rick Ware, a partnership that would last for years to come. Their partnership lasted until the end of 2015. During the span from 2011 to 2015, Long ran 77 races, a majority with Rick Ware. But the next year in 2016, Carl formed MBM Motorsports, a 2-car operation that made 58 starts in its first year and 65 in its second year of operation, with Timmy Hill racing almost full-time. But it was 2017 where the story came full circle, over 8 years after his engine penalty at the All-Star Race weekend. NASCAR and Long came to an undisclosed agreement on the penalty matter, and NASCAR excused the penalty. So for the 11th race of the Cup season in 2017, Carl was able to pool funding together to enter the NASCAR Cup Series race at Kansas. In a facility of less than 5,000 square feet, 50 times smaller than Penske's NASCAR facility, Long worked with his team to build a Cup Series car. Long proved he would do anything to get back to the Cup Series by not only his resilience, but driving the team's hauler to Kansas himself. Before his return, he said, "Racing is an addiction. There's some people that get over an addiction real quick when they're broke. But when you start off broke and somehow seem to manage it and it gets in your blood, it's hard to just walk away." Carl showed off his resilience once again on race day, starting in last place and raced to the finish. He completed 256 of the 267 laps and finished 31st. Well, yeah, he was 11 laps down on speed, but the car didn't have any mechanical failures and it made it to the finish. Something 9 other teams couldn't say. Long made his last start in NASCAR in 2020 in the Xfinity Series at Martinsville. His owner days still haven't ended, as he just had his most successful season as an owner in 2022 with 3 top 10 finishes and even a top 5 with Timmy Hill. Although the team hasn't been off to a great start in 2023, Long has still managed over 100 starts as an owner in the Cup Series and almost 500 in the Xfinity Series. MBM Motorsports will probably never be a race-winning team, but not many operations stay in business for a decade. Carl Long will never go down as a superstar driver either, but he has managed a career in the sport that he loves and has gone further than millions of others who have tried. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.